It's time for Ask Mike Mondays. Mike answers one listener's question every week. Here's Michael Becker and Paul Peebles.
Welcome to Ask Mike Mondays. I'm your host, Paul Peebles, National Underwriter for Old Capital. And joining me today, again, the governor of Beckerville, the man himself, Mr. Michael Becker.
Hey, Paul.
How are you, Michael?
Doing well. Can't complain.
Well, fantastic. We haven't had an Ask Mike Monday in a little bit. You guys have been just heads down over at SPI, just doing more deals than the law allows.
We've been busy working away. Had a little trip to Ireland and back.
How was that?
Nice.
Would you recommend a trip to Ireland?
Ireland was great. Do my Rick Steves impression. It was great. We went all around the island. Exactly what I thought it would be is green and hills and sheeps everywhere and pubs. So I highly would recommend it. It was a little scary. I did learn that they had stone walls, tiny roads, and they didn't believe in medians or shoulders over there. So driving on the wrong side was a little sketchy a couple times, but it all worked out.
That's great. Did you have a Guinness or two for?
One or two. We actually toured both the Jameson store and the Guinness store, which was pretty neat.
Oh, that's great. That sounds like it was a wonderful trip for you and your wife for your birthday. So congratulations on a great birthday in Ireland. So I thought we would ask a question of Mike. This comes in from a listener. As a future syndicator trying to establish a team, is it recommended to have both a real estate attorney and an SEC attorney? Can this be one role? If not, does the real estate attorney need to practice in the same state of where the investment property is at?
Yeah, so I think you can do this. We've done this both ways. We have many attorneys, it feels like sometimes, but the way we're typically doing transactions is sometimes we've used our real estate attorney to do some securities work, and then sometimes we use a separate securities lawyer to do the securities work, draft the PPM, set the company agreement, things like that. Then we've had a real estate lawyer do the transactional work, the contract, do the lender required legal work. So yeah, so it depends. It depends on your lawyer. So if your lawyer's with a large enough firm and they certainly have background in history and some bandwidth and can do the securities work, I think there's no wrong reason to use the same lawyer on both. But, sometimes when you have just some securities lawyers that kind of just only do securities work, they're not as versed in transactional work. And so it's not just putting together your PSA. A lot of the work that your lawyer does is around the lender required work, such as draft opinion letters and do all the searches and provide all the legal diligence that the lender's attorney requires.
And what is that? What are searches and what are some of the legal work that your attorney gets into that you may not see? You may just see them do the contract review, but what are some of the things that your contracts attorney does also? Yeah,
so on top of just drafting the purchase and sale agreement, they'll typically do title review. So they'll make sure that they review the title commitment as well as the survey and make sure that it's all compliant and there's nothing they need to object to, and make sure that you feel comfortable that you're getting clean title to your property. So then on top of that, I mentioned there's like the lender legal work. So UCC searches are going to be required. So they typically coordinate and order searches on the borrowing entity and any sort of key principals or guarantors to loan. So they kind of make sure that they do public record searches, essentially is what it is.
What are they looking for?
Yeah, they're looking for bankruptcies or any sort of pending lawsuits or anything that might show up in the public records that is negative about the borrowing entity and or the main principals in the deal, and make sure that the lender kind of does basic diligence and background on who they're lending money to. And then on top of that, they make sure that they have to form the entity has a proper SPE language. So the lender will have some single purpose entity language that restrict the ability of the borrowing entity to take on other debt that's besides what the lender has, and certain other things, and just kind of standard boilerplate provisions they want to have in your company agreement. And then on top of that, they have to provide what's called an opinion letter. So basically your lawyer is going to write an opinion that the entity that's borrowing the money is managed and controlled by the people signing the documents and has legal right and authority to do so, and that the lender can rely on that. And if that's not truly the case, they can go out to your lawyer's insurance policy if something turns out not to be the case.
So do you ever enter into a purchase sale agreement without having an attorney?
No, I would not recommend that. We have bought some properties from people that try to not have attorneys, but I really don't even want to buy a property from someone else who doesn't have an attorney, because then it's just going to cause other problems and slow it down. So it's kind of penny wise and pound foolish. A lawyer is definitely worth it, especially when you're talking about any transaction of size. I mean, you're talking about $1 million, $2 million transaction, which is kind of on the lower end of the scale anymore. that is still a ton of money. So I would certainly think it makes sense to spend, $4,000 or $5,000 to have a lawyer represent you through a transaction like that.
And then let me ask that question concerning a securities attorney that is going to build your private placement memorandum, the ability to offer an opportunity for people to purchase membership into your LLC that you're creating to raise the money to buy the property. You don't try to do that yourself.
Of course, yeah. I definitely don't want to go to jail either. So I think that's a way of getting in trouble is to practice securities law without a license. I think that's a really foolish thing to do. There's a lot of nuances, and it is pretty straightforward, but there's some nuances to it, and just to make sure that you have your I's dotted and T's crossed, especially if you're out there raising capital, you're taking money in. I've seen a lot of other people out there that I feel have cut corners. It's one thing we've never tried to do is cut corners on securities work. Just hire a lawyer, do what they tell you to do, follow the rules. Make sure you document everything. Make sure you have, if you're doing a 506B, you have a pre-existing relationship with someone. Have that documented somehow. Take in the questionnaire. If you're taking money from someone that has a trust, make sure you get a copy of the trust agreement. You read it and know that they have authority to sign on behalf of it. And just kind of do the extra mile. And I think that certainly will pay off in spades, because I know if one of these deals go bad, people tend to try to sue everybody. So you want to do your best to kind of, these documents are there for when things go bad. When things go good, no one needs these documents. These documents are there for when things go not so well, and that's when they become important.
And going back to a contracts attorney, you guys typically use a Texas-based attorney that's familiar with the Texas rules.
Yes.
And now on the security side, you can use an attorney not just in Texas, you can use an attorney throughout the United States, because that's really federal laws.
Correct, yeah. So most of these, virtually every deal that we've ever seen, I don't know if I've ever seen one that hasn't done this. When you're raising capital, you're going to use a Reg D exemption in most cases. And then the Reg D exemption, you either use 506B or 506C, so you can generally solicit or not. But those are federal exemptions, so they trump the state law. So that lawyer could be, if I'm doing a property in Texas, we can use a lawyer in California or New York. It doesn't matter.
Now, here's the $1 million question for a $1 million answer. What does a securities attorney typically cost? So again, you're trying to do it right. Again, you're going to hire a securities attorney that this is not their first rodeo. They've done this for 5, 10, 20 years. They're familiar with the forms that need to be done. They're there for your protection and for your investors' protection, that everything is disclosed. So what does that cost?
Usually these PPMs run somewhere in the ballpark about $15,000 for the PPM, the company agreement, getting it all done, somewhere in that ballpark. I've seen some people maybe get them done for $10,000, and then I've seen them go up from there. Generally, when we do these, we have a sliding scale depending on how much money we raise. And the thought process is the more money you raise, the more risk in the deal. So the lawyer has higher error and omissions and malpractice insurance and things like that. So it costs him more money the larger they do with insurance. So he tends to charge a little bit more, because I always was pushing back on that, because it's like the same amount of work for you, whether it's $1 million or $10 million. But that made sense to me when we got that answer. But somewhere around 10 to 15 grand is pretty typical from what I've seen out in the marketplace.
So if somebody wanted to know a little bit more about SPI and what you guys do, because you are the smartest guy in the room, so what would they have to do? How do they build a relationship with you?
Yeah, the best way to find out more information about us is simply just go to a company's website, which is www.spiadvisory.com. That's www.spi, like spy, advisory.com. There's a contact us form. You fill that out, and I'm always happy to have a 10 or 15-minute telephone call with people I meet off the podcast.
That sounds great. Mike, we appreciate you coming in and spending some time with us in the podcast. Again, I'm Paul Peebles. That was Michael Becker. Have a good day.